Think about the last time you walked into a room full of people and felt your mind go completely blank. Or the moment a conversation died into uncomfortable silence and you had no idea how to revive it. Or the way you replayed something you said for hours afterward, convinced everyone noticed, convinced you came across wrong, convinced that other people, the naturally charming ones, never feel this way. Here is the truth that social psychology has known for decades and almost nobody teaches they do. The difference between people who seem effortlessly good at conversation and people who struggle isn't talent, personality type, or some mysterious social gift. It's understanding. It's knowing how human communication actually works, and most people were never taught. Shyness, social anxiety, the fear of judgment, the inability to keep a conversation going past surface-level small talk, none of these are personality flaws. They are the entirely predictable result of navigating one of the most complex systems in human behavior without ever being given a map. Schools teach mathematics, history, and literature. Nobody teaches you how to make another person feel genuinely heard, or why some people light up every room they enter, while others disappear into the wall despite wanting desperately to connect. Human communication isn't magic. It is psychology. And psychology can be learned. This video is that map. By the time we're done, you'll understand why your brain makes social situations harder than they need to be, what the most charismatic people in the world actually do differently, and how to build the kind of social confidence that doesn't depend on the perfect thing to say. Conversation was never about performance. It was always about connection. And connection is something every human being is already wired for. Long before language existed in anything resembling its modern form, human beings were already using communication as a survival tool. The ability to coordinate with others to warn of danger, share resources, build trust across a group was the single most decisive advantage our species had. Humans didn't survive because they were the strongest or the fastest. They survived because they were the most connected. This is why loneliness registers in the human brain as physical pain, because evolutionarily speaking, it was a genuine emergency signal. The need for social belonging isn't a personality trait or a cultural preference. It's a biological drive as fundamental as hunger or thirst. When you feel the pull toward connection, the desire to be known, to be heard, to matter to the people around you, that isn't weakness. That is hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary pressure reminding you what you were built for. Here's something social psychology reveals that most people find uncomfortable to hear the version of yourself you're carefully managing in social situations, the one choosing words strategically, monitoring how you coming across. Trying to appear interesting and impressive all at once is exhausting everyone in the room, including you. The core mistake anxious communicators make isn't talking too much or too little. It is entering every interaction with the wrong goal entirely. When the silent question driving the conversation is, what do they think of me? The entire dynamic shifts from connection to evaluation. And people feel that shift even when they can name it. The most socially magnetic people are not the ones working hardest to be liked. They are the ones who have genuinely stopped making the conversation about themselves. Their attention is outward. Their curiosity is real, not performed. When you shift from trying to impress to trying to understand, from broadcasting to receiving, the other person relaxes, the conversation deepens, and you become far more memorable than any rehearsed impression could have made you. Dale Carnegie understood this almost a century ago. People don't remember what you said nearly as much as they remember how you made them feel. There is a particular kind of person you've almost certainly encountered, someone who, after just a few minutes of conversation, makes you feel like the most interesting person in the room. They are not necessarily the wittiest or the most knowledgeable. What they do with remarkable consistency is make you feel genuinely heard. Active listening is one of the most underestimated skills in all of human communication. Not passive silence while waiting for your turn to speak, but real, engaged, emotionally present attention that signals what you're saying matters, and so do you. Research shows that feeling understood activates the same reward centers in the brain as physical comfort. Being truly listened to feels neurologically like being safe. The practical application is simpler than most people expect. Ask follow-up questions that go one level deeper than the surface answer. Notice the emotion underneath the words, not just the content of them. Resist the urge to relate everything back to your own experience the moment someone pauses. These aren't tea tricks, they are the behavioral expressions of genuine interest, and people can feel the difference instantly. The most memorable people in your life probably spoke less than you remember. They just listened better than anyone else. Here's what happens inside the mind of someone with social anxiety during a conversation, while one part of the brain is trying to engage with what the other person is saying. Another part is running a real-time audit monitoring tone of voice, analyzing facial expressions for signs of boredom, editing the next sentence before it's even formed. This internal surveillance system doesn't feel like overthinking. It feels like carefulness. But the cruel irony that behavioral psychology consistently reveals is that the more intensely you monitor yourself, the worse your performance becomes, because genuine connection requires presence. And presence is impossible when your attention is split between the conversation and your own internal critic. This is called self-focused attention, and it creates a feedback loop. The more you monitor yourself, the more self-conscious you become. The more your words lose their natural flow, which then confirms the original fear that something is wrong with how you're coming across. Breaking that loop doesn't require eliminating self-awareness. It requires redirecting attention outward, back toward the other person. Make their words your anchor. The conversation gets better the moment you stop watching yourself have it. By the time the first word of a conversation has been spoken, your brain has already made a series of rapid, unconscious assessments about the person in front of you, based entirely on nonverbal information. Posture, eye contact, micro-expressions, all of this is processed by social circuitry that evolved long before language did. The emotional content of an interaction is conveyed far more through body language and tone of voice than through the actual words being used, which means you can say exactly the right thing and still leave entirely the wrong impression because the body is having a different conversation than the mouth. Learning to read body language in others gives you access to information most people never consciously register. And deliberately managing your own nonverbal signals, maintaining warm eye contact, orienting your body toward the person you're speaking with, slowing your speech to project calm rather than anxiety, changes how others experience you beneath conscious processing. Here's what surprises most people: body language doesn't just affect how others see you, it affects how you see yourself. Carry yourself like someone who belongs in the room, and your brain will slowly start to believe it. Facts inform, stories transform. You can present someone with the most compelling data in the world and watch their eyes glaze over, then tell them a single story about one person experiencing the reality behind that data. And suddenly they were leaning forward, emotionally invested. Neuroscience shows that when we hear a well-told story, our brains simulate it, activating the same neural regions that would fire if we were actually living the experience. Stories don't just communicate ideas. They create shared emotional reality. And shared emotional reality is the raw material of genuine human connection. The most socially compelling people in any room are almost always skilled storytellers, not because they have more dramatic lives, but because they've learned to frame ordinary experiences in ways that carry emotional weight. The structure is simpler than most people think: a moment of tension, a specific detail that makes the scene real, and an emotional truth at the end that means something beyond the event itself. The conversation that changes a relationship is almost never built on facts. It's the one where someone told the truth through a story, and the other person felt for a moment completely understood. Humor is one of the most sophisticated and least understood tools in human communication. Most people think of it as entertainment, as a way to be liked. But the neuroscience of laughter tells a different story. When two people laugh together, cortisol drops, oxytocin releases, and the nervous system registers the social environment as safe. Humor doesn't just make interactions more enjoyable. It literally lowers the unconscious threat level that every human brain maintains in social situations. It signals we are on the same side. This is a space where you can relax. The funniest people in any social setting are rarely the ones telling the most polished jokes. They're the ones most skilled at finding the absurdity in shared experience, pointing to the thing everyone is quietly thinking and naming it with just enough lightness that the tension dissolves. Stop trying to be funny and start looking for what is genuinely amusing about the situation you're both already in. Laughter that comes from recognition always lands deeper than laughter that comes from a punchline. Confidence is not a prerequisite for social action. It is the result of it. The brain builds trust in its own social capabilities through repeated exposure, gradual desensitization, and the accumulated evidence of having survived situations that once felt threatening. You don't think your way into confidence. You act your way into it, one uncomfortable interaction at a time. The anxiety doesn't disappear before you approach the situation. It diminishes because you approached it anyway, and the catastrophe your brain was predicting didn't materialize. Every small social risk taken, the conversation started with a stranger, the opinion offered without an apologetic qualifier. The story told without waiting for guaranteed safety is a data point that slowly recalibrates your nervous system. The fear of judgment is universal. It is the output of a threat detection system that, for most of human history, was responding to a genuine survival emergency. Social rejection in ancestral environments didn't just sting, it could cost you your life. That same system is fully operational in your nervous system right now. The practical path through this isn't to convince your brain that rejection isn't dangerous. It's to gradually accumulate evidence that you can survive it, that the awkward moment passes, that the judgment when it comes is survivable. The people living the fullest social lives are not the ones who stopped caring about judgment. They were the ones who decided connection mattered more. Think of the most socially effortless person you know. Now consider the possibility that what you are witnessing isn't a natural gift, but an accumulated skill. Thousands of hours of interaction, observation, failure, adjustment, and gradual refinement that happened largely out of sight. Every socially intelligent behavior you've ever admired, the warm eye contact, the perfectly timed question, the ability to make someone feel seen in 30 seconds flat, was learned, observed in someone else, attempted imperfectly, refined through repetition, and eventually internalized to the point where it no longer looked like effort. The great communicators weren't handed their abilities. They built them often from starting points of profound shyness and the same self-consciousness that makes conversation feel impossible for so many people today. We've covered a lot of ground, from the evolutionary roots of your need for connection, to the psychology of active listening, to the neuroscience of charisma. And if there's one thread running through all of it, it is this: the difficulty you've felt around communication was never a reflection of who you are. It was a reflection of what you were never taught. Connection is not a reward for the confident. It is the practice through which confidence is built. Every conversation you enter with genuine curiosity, every moment you choose presence over performance, every time you decide that the person in front of you is worth your full attention, you are not just having a better interaction, you are becoming a different kind of communicator. And that difference compounds over time in ways that will touch every area of your life. Talking to people was never about saying the right things. It was always about being brave enough to actually show up. Subscribe to The Human Professor, hit the notification bell, and come back every week for more content that takes the deepest science of human behavior and turns it into something you can actually use. The conversation that changes your life might be closer than you think. Don't let fear be the reason it never happens.